What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. In this video, I'm going to be building one of the best value gaming PCs you can possibly put together in 2022. A system that features a dedicated GPU and is great for those esports titles at 1080p. Based around the brand new budget B660 chipset, and yes, a GT 1030, this is a pretty interesting build. But just how viable is it in some of 2022's latest titles? Well, in this full build guide, I'll be answering that question, assembling the system, benchmarking it later, and setting it up to get gaming. Let's do this. As we do in a lot of builds, I'm going to kick things off by focusing on the motherboard assembly. That includes the motherboard, an M.2 SSD, your CPU, and of course your RAM. Now, these are your core components that you can go ahead and build out of the case without much hassle, and it makes the build a lot easier to do things in this order. Specifically, I'm going to focus on the motherboard and CPU first off. There is something really quite exciting about unboxing a brand new motherboard for the first time, even if it's a super budget board like this one. This right here is the brand new ASUS B660M-A-D4. This has to be up there with one of the most advanced cheap motherboards I've ever seen. Not only does it have a pretty good I/O, yes it is fairly slimline, but you still get all of your display outputs, including DisplayPort and HDMI times 2. You get next generation USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type A with a Type C connector on our front panel just here, 4 RAM DIMM slots, plenty of PCIe expansion, and of course room for Gen 4 SSDs. The latest and greatest super fast speedy drives are all supported as standard in this motherboard. What we're really bothered about though is support for the latest Intel CPUs, something you can now overclock on these B660 chipset motherboards. A decision that Intel have lightly made off the back of recent developments with AMD, and just how overclockable some of their B550 boards have gotten recently. Installing the CPU into this build's really easy. You want to go ahead and locate the little golden triangle on the bottom left-hand corner of the CPU, and you want to match this up with the triangle on the corner of your motherboard. For us today, that's the bottom left-hand corner of the socket, and then you can go ahead and drop the processor in. As far as the actual processor choice goes, you've got a few options. This right here is the brand new i5-12400F, the entry-level i5 chip that provides great gaming performance when it comes to both single-threaded and multi-threaded workloads. Is it overkill for a GT 1030? Yes, but that's not the point. The point is to make the whole system upgradable, so that when GPUs finally come back into stock, something we hope to see this year, making this system a great stepping stone for when that day finally comes. I'll be installing the cooler very shortly, but before any of that, I'm going to pop in the RAM or the memory. This right here is Patriot's Viper Steel. It is a kit that matches aesthetically quite well with our motherboard. It's not black, which is nice to see. I'm kind of bored nowadays of black components, so trying to spice things up a little bit. On this motherboard, we want to be using the 2nd and 4th RAM DIMM slots. These here are the grey ones in our case. Not only will this give us the dual channel performance upside with our 16GB kit comprised of two 8GB DIMMs, but it also looks a bit nicer. And once again, we've got 2 slots free. Pick up an identical kit of RAM, a second in your basket, and you can populate 32GB of total memory. Really fantastic to see this on our lovely budget motherboard. Before we come back around then and do the CPU cooler, I'm going to go ahead and pop in the SSD next up. This right here is a Seagate BarraCuda 510, a super budget, super cheap NVMe drive. Speeds in the region of about 3GB a second. Make sure that you're not going to witness any bottlenecking, and also of course ensure your system is super snappy and super quick. We'll be popping it underneath this M.2 heatsink, which will help to keep the drive cool. But for this, you will need to grab yourself a smaller screwdriver than usual. Some would call it a teeny tiny screwdriver to remove the heatsink, pop the drive into place and fasten it back down. Nice and simple, nice and easy, and once we've done this, the CPU, RAM and SSD are all complete. The cooler I have picked up in particular is Cooler Master's Hyper 212 RGB Black Edition. Now this is a really great cooler choice. It comes in around the $25–30 mark, often when it's on sale, but please check the links in the description below for latest pricing and availability. Disclaimer, they are affiliate links. Now this cooler does a great job keeping the chip nice and chilly, also helps with a little bit of overclocking headroom if that's a route you choose to go down, but all in all keeps the build quiet and the performance solid. Even without overclocking, a good cooler makes all the difference, as we discussed in a video you can find in the card section now. Take your backplate that comes included with the cooler. You can see this one here has got 4 posts on each corner. These will help us to secure the cooler into place. Often backplates like these, as you'll see, have a degree of adjustability, allowing them to fit through the correct holes on your motherboard. You'll then be able to see the 4 silver posts prodding through the motherboard, which will be coupling with these female to female adapters. You can see here they've got a thread on one end and a thread on the other, and they'll convert the silver posts into actual usable mounting hardware. You then want to pick up the cooler itself and some of these brackets. These 2 brackets are basically going to pop on the other side of the cooler, like so, and screw into those female to female posts. So go ahead and secure these brackets onto the cooler, then drop a dab of thermal paste on the CPU. This comes included in the cooler's box before fastening the unit down. You will need to take the fan off the cooler for this stage. We'll pop the fan back on later once we've installed into the motherboard. A-OK. For the case in this build, I've actually gone for the Nexus, the Tecware Nexus. I've just merged the 2 words into one. M2. It's a tempered glass case with a really cool 2-tone design. It actually has a white interior, as you will be able to see if we take off the box, we remove some of our packaging, and try not to get an anti-static shock as we remove the polished styrene. One of the best things about this case is just how affordable and cheap it is. You still get decent GPU support, and the small, compact micro ATX form factor makes it great for a true desktop PC. It's not going to overwhelm your gaming setup anytime soon, and with ventilation down both sides, you know your airflow is going to be pretty decent too. I'm going to remove all of the case's side panels, then lay the chassis down flat, as installing the motherboard this way will be a good piece easier. Before we go all gunko and pop the motherboard in, we do just need to clip in the rear IO shield, so that's this metal plate right here. We're going to clip that in. I've just hurt my finger. I've actually cut myself. Oh no, that's a disaster. Ow, I've got to persevere though and just get it in there. Come on, in we go. Ow, ow. Ow, this is not getting any less painful. Ow. Ow. Ow, I've got to... Oh, no. I hate IO shields. They're awful. Ow. There we go. Right, I am now bleeding, though. So, I don't know if we have to blur that or whether we can show blood on YouTube. I'm not quite sure, but that hurt. Like, a lot. Ow. Oh, blood on the case as well. No. Oh, disastrous. This has gone awfully... Oh, terribly wrong. This is not the way that this was supposed to go. Not the way. Once that is all installed then, and the first aid procedures have been completed, we can move on to the power supply. Now, to tell you the truth, any 650 watt unit you can find from a reputable manufacturer with a decent 80 plus bronze, silver or gold certification is going to work well. This right here is from BitFenix, so a bit of an unusual name in the power supply world, but a great choice nevertheless. It isn't modular, unfortunately, meaning we have got all of these cables we need to try and cable manage, but they are all sleeved and they are all black, so that at least they look fairly good as far as cables are concerned. Lift any of your other connections out the way and slide the unit into place. You haven't got a huge deal of room here for long power supplies, so keep that in mind. Is this overkill for this build as far as wattage goes? Yes, but once again, going to be good for up to like a 3060 Ti. So if you did upgrade to a 3050, 60, AMD 6500 XT, you're going to be completely fine, and this power supply is going to serve you well. Get it installed with the 4 screws at the rear, and then plug up your CPU power connector, going to the top left of the motherboard, and the motherboard power connector going to the center right hand side. Once we're all wired up, it brings us nicely on to the last part of the video, the graphics card. Now, 2022 is looking to be a slightly better year for GPU stock and availability. Mining at the moment appears to have a sell-by date. Hopefully in May, Ethereum will switch the way that GPU mining works, rendering the technique basically obsolete, at least in the world of Ethereum. Plus, new GPUs from Nvidia with the 3050, budget cards from AMD with the 6500 XT and non-XT cards. You've then also got increased supply of the 3060 Ti with a rumoured new GPU chip to be used on that card, with a new 2060 Super refresh, 3090 Ti that was been rumoured but now apparently delayed, and an updated 3080 Ti with more VRAM. There's cards everywhere. And hopefully this increased number of available GPUs should actually lead to better stock and availability. And hopefully no 4000 series refresh anytime soon will mean we're not bogged down with new cards either that haven't quite filtered into supply chains. In the meantime though, you do need a budget GPU to get going, to make a system like this one actually plausible for gaming this year. And that's where the GT 1030 GDDR5 version comes in. Now this isn't going to be the card for everybody. If you're looking to play games like Cyberpunk or even the new Battlefield 2042, it's not quite got the muscles for that. Sorry. But if esports oriented games like Fortnite, Apex Legends, even a bit of Call of Duty Warzone are more your flavour, this will work well. Similarly with racing games or titles like CSGO or Valorant, easier to run games where frame rate is less of an issue. We'll be exploring in much more detail later though the actual performance legs of this 1030, so hold tight for that one. The card is also a really good stopgap because it means that buying it now for say the $90 mark and selling it later on is not going to lose you a great deal of money. Picking up a 2060 Super for 3 times MSRP is never going to end well for the bank balance when you decide that it's time up and you want to swap it out for something better. I'm just going to spin the case around and snap off the rear top PCIe cover. I tell you, this build is just looking for ways to cut more of my fingers, but that's okay. Be really careful. These are often a feature on budget chassis. They're not my favourite, but if it saves us $20 on a case, it saves us $20 on a case. And we can spin the chassis round, locating our PCIe slot. That's this one here. Pushing back the retention clip on the end and going ahead and sliding our lovely ASUS GPU into place. Here we go. Bit of pressure. And it clicks in nice and easily. Fasten it down with a screw at the rear to secure the card in, and no power is needed here, at least for this GPU. It will feed off your motherboard's PCIe power, making things nice and easy. And with that, we're pretty much ready to boot the system up and see just how well it performs. But first, it's time to see if a budget build really can look good, in the only way we know how. I'll see you in a second, but first, roll that montage. It's now time to jump into the performance of this GT 1030 system. For a budget build, it looks really good, but do the frame rate numbers actually correspond? Well, for this video, we've tested a range of titles including CSGO, Overwatch, Fortnite, Valorant, Forza, and Apex Legends to give you guys the most consistent performance picture we can from what's undoubtedly one of the cheapest PCs you can actually build right now. Let's kick things off by looking closely at GTA 5. At 1080p low settings, the results we achieved might just surprise you. This $99 GPU, prices of course subject to change, actually gave us more than 60 frames per second at 1080p. Wow! 63 FPS on average with 58 and 51 for the 90 and 99th percentiles, rounded off an impressive first showing. But do the numbers stay this good all the way through? Sort of. Forza Horizon 5 is next up. Now this is of course a racing title, so you don't need the all-important 60 FPS. 30 to 40 will be just fine. Here we got 33 frames per second at 1080p low. Although keep in mind, Forza Horizon 5 is the most AAA, most intense of all the games we tested. The game visually still looked very, very playable though, and this was tested in the fairly intense in-game benchmark mode. Moving on to Apex Legends, and your mileage will vary. Here at 1080p competitive or low settings, we got 51 frames per second. Once again, edging us very close to the 60 FPS mark, important for a first-person shooter. By no means a perfect result, but not too far off considering how intensive Apex is to play. Moving on to Valorant, and here the mileage varies significantly. 1080p normal medium settings we didn't even tune down to low gave us over 170 frames per second, or 174 FPS to be precise. 90 and 99th percentiles showed consistent frame rates, and all in all I was fairly impressed. We also tested out Fortnite, a game that at 1080p competitive settings has a huge question mark when it comes to the 1030. Could this be the perfect Fortnite combo on the lowest of budgets? Potentially yes. 65 FPS at 1080p competitive settings on average, with a frame rate that never really dipped below 60 and essentially never dipped below 54, gives us some really big food for thought. It's the same case in Overwatch, where at 1080p low settings again, we got more than 90 frames per second on average, in a game that graphically, even at low settings, still looks really good. Remember, this is all full 1080p gaming. No 720p gaming you'll get with an APU, as we've explored in a video over on the channel. To round things off, we also tested out CSGO 1080p once again, and here we got an average of 135 frames per second. Showing whether or not the 1030 is worth it actually more depends on the games you're looking to play, as opposed to your thoughts on the card in general. Is it a good card for Cyberpunk, Halo and Battlefield 2042? Absolutely not. But if you're playing a bit of Valorant, playing a bit of Apex, CSGO, then it might just be a very viable card for you, and a perfect stopgap measure until GPUs on the whole come back into stock at much better prices. And with that, that pretty much wraps it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a big old like rating, get subscribed to see more from me and the entire GeekaWhat team. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.